The Ultimate Fighting Championship was born in 1993, but it wasn't until 2001, when Dana White became the president, that the fighting league became popular. Boxing used to be the top combat sport, but these days, UFC reigns supreme, and Jon Jones' triumphant return to the octagon brought plenty of hype. There has been a plethora of great UFC fighters to come and go from every weight class. We have seen this organization grow from a wild experience into one of the most recognized sports leagues in the world. This league has some of the best fighters in the world, and it was difficult to narrow it down. But here are my top 10 greatest UFC fighters of all time. Let's start with number 10. Chuck Liddell. In the early 2000s, Chuck Liddell put the UFC on the map with his ferocious knockouts while wearing his famous mohawk. Liddell could be credited as being almost everyone's first favorite fighter when they began watching MMA. Some may question the level of competition UFC icon Chuck Liddell faced during his illustrious career. However, he competed in a very different era where sports science didn't have quite the influence and wrestling dominated the game. Yet, the Iceman and his deadly right hand overcame all of that. He was one of the sport's first crossover stars with a style and aura that mirrored Mike Tyson. Furthermore, his fights and wins over legends like Tito Ortiz and Randy Couture elevated the UFC to new heights and helped to establish the brand as a legitimate source for elite-level talent in the fighting game. Number 9. Daniel Cormier. There is no question that Daniel Cormier is one of the best UFC fighters of all time. He's one of the best wrestlers in the world, but also has the stand-up game to go toe-to-toe with the best in the world. He is one of just 8 in promotion history to hold belts in 2 weight classes and is among only 3 athletes that was able to defend both. He has a hit list that includes MMA legends like Dan Henderson, Frank Mir, Stipe Miocic, and Alexander Gustafsson, and his only losses in the UFC were against 2 other fighters on this list. Both are the greatest ever in their divisions. Number 8. Amanda Nunes. The third champ in UFC history, Amanda Nunes absolutely demolished 2 weight classes simultaneously. Nunes is one of the best UFC fighters of all time because she is the greatest female fighter in the sport's history. Lioness fought every elite combatant in the divisions she competed in and in most cases absolutely obliterated them. Her victories over Chris Cyborg and Ronda Rousey will be on highlight reels forever, and she set a gold standard for female competitors in any fight sport. She was a once-in-a-generation talent and an icon of women's sports. Number 7. Kamaru Usman. While there will always be a debate on who is the greatest UFC welterweight ever, if Kamaru Usman is your preferred choice, it is hard to argue against him, especially after he started his octagon run with 15 straight wins and 6 in title fights. Usman had 5 title defenses, and despite losing his last 2 matches, it doesn't seem like he's going to slow down anytime soon as he's chasing Georges St Pierre for welterweight greatness. Yet, what truly makes him special is his ability to evolve from a wrestling and cardio-dominant fighter to a complete MMA competitor. There is little he can't do, and he showed it by beating top talents like George Masvidal, Colby Covington, Tyron Woodley, and Gilbert Burns. Usman lost a few rounds during his peak period, and that is why he is one of the best UFC fighters of all time. Number 6. Stipe Miocic. Stipe Miocic is the best UFC heavyweight of all time, full stop. This weight class bounces around more often than any other class, as heavyweights have the knockout power to end the bout at any moment. Miocic has proven to be a top athlete throughout his MMA career. Yes, he wasn't perfect and suffered a few losses during his run in the octagon. However, there is no division more volatile and harder to maintain relevance than heavyweight. Yet for a decade he was an elite talent in the division as he scored wins over legends of the sport like Cormier, Fabricio Werdum, and Junior Dos Santos. What really makes Miocic special is he was able to do so without being a gifted athlete and was often the underdog in some of his biggest wins. Number 5. Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson silently defended the flyweight title 11 consecutive times. That's tied for first all-time with Jon Jones. Johnson can be credited for putting the flyweight division on the map, as it is now one of the most thrilling weight classes in the UFC. DJ is the greatest flyweight in MMA history, and it isn't even close. There was little Johnson couldn't do in a cage, and if not for a lack of finishes, he would be at the top of this list. What also makes Mighty Mouse a true UFC legend is he reigned over the 125-pound division for 6 years with honor, respect, and grace. In many ways, he was the perfect MMA athlete. Number 4. Anderson Silva. Perhaps one of the most dominant title reigns in UFC history, Anderson Silva proved to be the best during his prime. Once he put his hands down and used movement as his main defense, every viewer knew what was coming next. A knockout.
I mean, that's just amazing. And again, he's out. Anderson Silva! Like we said, second to none. Oh! He front kicked him in the face! Absolutely right! Trying to finish. It is all over! Kick to the face! Anderson Silva!
Anderson Silva is not just one of the very best UFC fighters of all time, but he is the king of MMA in Brazil. The Spider was one of the few fighters whose legend was so impressive that many of his foes were beaten even before they reached the cage. While he had several head-scratching moments during his UFC career, he was a truly awe-inspiring talent that many fight fans pick as the greatest pound-for-pound striker the sport has ever seen. In the end, age was what finally brought Silva down, and not a man could beat him in his prime. Number 3. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Going 29-0, Khabib set the pace in every single fight he participated in. His wrestling is so strong it makes elite wrestlers look like novices. Khabib was not an athlete as gifted as St Pierre, Silva, Johnson, or Jones, yet he dominated on a level that none of them ever did. During his 13 fights in the octagon, he never lost a round and rarely even had difficult moments. He was an absolute force of nature in the best division of sport. The Eagle fought nearly every elite fighter of his era and beat them all definitively, including Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje. He was a part of the biggest fight in UFC history, and he won it. Number 2. George St Pierre. Canadian George St Pierre was his homeland's greatest fighting export and the best ambassador in the sport's history. Like Johnson, he was an honorable assassin who dominated one of the promotion's toughest divisions with respect and grace. Rarely did he lose a round during his peak. St Pierre was known to stick to his game plan and dominate the fight. What was more impressive is he would often play to his opponent's strengths and outclass them at their own game. Yet, what cemented his amazing legacy was knocking the retirement rust off after 4 years away and moving up in weight to be one of the Elite 8 fighters to win belts in 2 divisions. And in number 1, Jon Jones. Jon Jones is the best UFC fighter of all time, while also being one of its most controversial. There are some who will question his place in the sport due to failed drug tests, but it is nevertheless hard to overlook his absurd resume during his run in the UFC. After winning the light heavyweight title at just 23 years old, Jon Jones defended the belt 11 times. His athletic abilities, combined with his technical style, make him a horrifying opponent to face. He beat multiple former champions and future Hall of Famers, and on several occasions made it look easy. He added to his legacy in 2023 when he made a long-awaited move up to heavyweight and easily dispatched Cyril Gane to become the latest fighter to win championships in 2 divisions. If a fight fan was creating the perfect fighter in the latest UFC video game, it would likely end up looking like Jon Jones.